Alright guys, just one more quick announcement. It's going to be the same one as earlier, but for anyone that just woke up and is coming in a little bit late. T-shirts, if you have a token that hasn't been marked yet, right around the corner you can get your t-shirt. If you have already gotten a t-shirt and it doesn't fit or anything like that, after lunch we're going to be doing exchanges, and you'll also be able to buy them for $10, preferably exact change. We're going to have a little bit of extra cash to do change, but besides that, it's cash only. There's an ATM right behind the Monster Girls by registration, and it's going to be first come, first serve. So it's going to, right after lunch, it might be the wild luck for a little bit, but hopefully everyone will get what they want. But besides that, let's give it up for Michael, veteran of ShowMeCon.
I will try not to disappoint. And I'm taking an extra 30 seconds. That's right there. You took 30 seconds of my time. All right, let's learn about some PowerShell post-exploitation Defender Ninja. My name is Michael Goff. There's 9 ways to pronounce that, so I wouldn't be surprised if you get it wrong. There's actually 10 if you pronounce it the original Irish way. I am a blue team defender, malware archaeologist. I'm a logaholic. My name is Michael. I'm a logaholic. I love properly configured logs. They can tell us a lot about who, what, where, when, and hopefully how. Logarithm is one of the sponsors of this event, so please pay them a visit. Tell them I sent you over there just cause, so they know that the t-shirt they gave me, and shout out to Greg Foss for helping me with the logarithm stuff. I am the creator of 7 Windows logging cheat sheets, so if you don't know about these, please get to know them. They are incredibly valuable to get you started on what to log. This is kind of the basic place to start. You can expand from there. There's also an advanced logging cheat sheet that David Longnecker and I worked on for stuff that's a little more advanced if you want to get into it. I am also the co-creator of LogMD, the log and malicious discovery tool. It does harvest logs, but a bunch of other non-log related stuff. And how many people here have listened to Breaking Down Security Incident Response, the BDIR podcast? A couple people. So we now have a podcast specifically focused with incident response. The idea here is to help you understand what we do every day and share that. So please take a listen to that. And Hacker Hurricane is my blog and my Twitter handle as well. And version 2 for LogMD went out. We're about to ship out version 2.1. You'll see a sneak peek of a screenshot in here. So what is the challenge? Well, PowerShell Exploitation. I consider this the #1 threat to organizations. Why? A lot of people, I don't know if you want to raise your hands, are still on Windows 7 or worse. And unfortunately, that means you're not running PowerShell 5 or even Server 2008. So the fact that you're on older PowerShell, the fact that PowerShell by default does not log anything, unfortunately, anything really valuable, and it's built into the system. Right? So malware loves to use this. It launches or downloads its payloads with PowerShell. So suddenly PowerShell, a utility that none of us really used much, has become like the #1 thing that the bad guys love to use. And the red teamers, right? The Dave Kennedys of the world, the Renee's Renegades of the worlds, and the Kevin Johnson's Professionally Evil. All the pen testers love this stuff because it's built in. So now all they have to do is add their script to the system. They're not adding new binaries, and they can pretty much own your box all day to Sunday with just PowerShell. It's already built into the OS. But they do make noise, and they can be detected if you know what to look for. So where do we start? First thing you have to do is check your settings. What is the configuration of your system, your servers, your workstations? You've got to understand that first. You know, what is the version you're running? Once you know that, you can start a project to start upgrading to PowerShell 5. Has anybody actually started a project and gone through the PowerShell 5 upgrade across the organization? Right, so you're making a concerted effort, so yeah, you should get a thumb drive for that. Is the logging enabled? Once you upgrade, again, nothing's on by default. You know, boo to Microsoft by not turning this stuff on by default. If you're using PowerShell v2 and profile.ps1 to set some items that are in the cheat sheets, know that it can be easily bypassed. So it's just not good enough. This is one of the reasons, if not the main reason, you need to upgrade to PowerShell 5. What was wrong with PowerShell v2 and 3, and even some in 4, was fixed in 5 and 6, and now it's actually usable and loggable. And the execution policy. Some people don't set this. It's not set by default. It's not a security control, but it is something that is bypassed, and it is something you can search for. So you need to understand what these things are, because this is what the bad guys will execute, check, and or change in your environment. So how can you check it? Turns out LogMD is the way you check it. If you run it, there's a free version. I encourage everybody to go download this. The first time you run it, it'll probably fail on 99 out of 100 machines in here, and it will give you a report. It'll tell you, hey, this is my PowerShell config. We built this in there to be real obvious every time you run it, so that you know where you stand, because the goal is to graduate and get to PowerShell 5 and get the stuff turned on. We also provide a report. This is great. I used to be a consultant, still am in aspects, and so I need this data in order to include in my reports. The red teamer should be using this to say, hey, you guys need to enable the things that failed here. It's an extensive report. The 5s indicate that LogMD compares your system to the Center for Internet Security Benchmarks, which, by the way, does not reference PowerShell at all, the US GCBs, ditto, and the Aussie Cyber Standards, and then the Windows Logging Cheat Sheet, WLCS. And so the 5 indicates these aren't in those standards. So this is the first indication. So to me, these standards are 5 years behind, because these things should be front and center, and they've actually harassed me to make some recommendations, but they can watch the talk and get the committee together. And we tell you what it is so that you can then make a project to go enable this stuff. Then, what do? You enable it. What do I enable? There's a cheat sheet, the Windows PowerShell logging cheat sheet specific to PowerShell, but also the Windows logging cheat sheet will tell you what to do, including profile PS1, but for version 2, we had no choice in the day but to set a couple of variables, which would give you a command line. But that doesn't really work much anymore, because every malware execution I see has the -nop or -no profile, which bypasses the profile, therefore it doesn't load the variables and you don't get any command line logging. This is why you need to upgrade to PowerShell v5. And of course, Microsoft has built-in bypasses, so yeah, double face plant there. There is a list. Thank you for Event Sentry taking some of the stuff and creating these tables, which came from Microsoft. They expanded a bunch, but if you want to know what the event IDs are, I've included them here for both the Windows PowerShell log. Yes, there are 2 PowerShell logs. The older V2, V3, V4 logs, which is Windows PowerShell, and then there's the PowerShell operational logs for version 4, 5, and 6. So understand that these are here for investigation, understand what they are. And the 4105s and 6s are not in here. Please do not enable those. It is what the pen testers will do to roll your logs, so watch out for the execution of those. They will enable this, and it will create so many entries that it'll just flush the logs, which is why you want a really big PowerShell log. The cheat sheet tells you how big. So typical malware. Let's take a look at what it does. Typical malware today, lots of PowerShell. It is rare. I don't even think I can remember a piece of malware I have gotten in the last year and a half that does not include a called PowerShell. As opposed to 2 years ago, we rarely saw it. It went from like nothing to every time very quickly. Probably within 6 months, it was like, hey, they're starting to use PowerShell. Hey, they're always using PowerShell. It was surprisingly quick how that graph went up. And because of that, we're hearing a lot about target attacks. I have friends in gaming. I came from gaming, and they're telling me all they see is PowerShell-based attacks now from the Chinese trying to attack the gaming industry. And the reason is they're living off the land, right? It's built into the operating system. Everything they need to own the system is already there. Pen testers love it because they don't have to do a bunch of extra code. They can check to see if your logging's turned on. Carlos Perez, former HP colleague of mine when I worked at HP, he wrote a Metasploit module which specifically checks the logging, what I tell you to set, to determine whether or not he can attack that area, right? And there's tons of PowerShell exploit kits, right? The empire has fallen, in my opinion. We can detect this. This talk will allow you to detect all these. So please, after you do all this turning on, play with all these tools and test against your environment to make sure you can catch these, because all those Renee's Renegades and Dave Kennedy's of the world and Kevin Johnson's, they love this stuff. And Adrian too, wherever he went. So let's talk about blue team, baby. Detection. I love blue team. It's definitely more sexy than red team because we get to kick them out. If you've ever kicked out an adversary out of an environment, I've been a consultant for HP. I've done red teaming. The biggest thrill in my career ever, other than sharing all this with you, is to kick the Chinese out of your environment. That is such a thrill. It is far more sexy than catching a pen tester. Kicking an adversary that owns hundreds of boxes out, pushing that button that says you're out of here, and wiping out all their infections and persistence is a feeling like no other. So blue team is sexy. So process create. This is the command line, built-in command line. It is not enabled by default. The command line logging has to be turned on. Process create has to be turned on. The cheat sheets will help you there. But if you look, this is a typical Word document. At the top of the line that's red, it's a Word doc launching command.exe, which then calls PowerShell. You can link this through the process IDs, which then downloads the stuff using PowerShell, and then launches the malware twice. Why? One checks the other. You kill one, the other one starts it back up, and it's got built-in fault tolerance. Awesome. And so this is a pretty typical scenario of what malware looks like. This is a LogMD report of a 4688 executing a Word doc piece of malware. Now that little line you saw here, right there on that line here, that's actually what's in that particular process command line. All right? Anybody care to guess what this thing's doing? No, you have no idea. It's just a big blob to most of us. And so what we have to do is kind of understand what's going on with PowerShell and say, what kind of things can we do or look at that says, I need to study this further, I need to pull this out, I need to research this, I need to trigger an alert on this, etc. If we take out 42 of the lines, we can see a little bit in here. Lots of obfuscation. There's reference to ComSpec. A whole bunch of sets, which means they've done a bunch of variables. There's 42 lines of more Base64 code. And there's some names, some password, etc. All in that big blurb. So did that look normal to you at all? I don't think so. So 4688 will show you this tree of execution. And your log management solutions can pull this if you configure your endpoints correctly and use the agents to send it to log management. And what called PowerShell, right? Word calling command.exe or C script or W script or PowerShell, always bad. This kind of process combination or this parent-child scenario is something you should detect on. It's always bad. Most of the EDRs will see this condition and say, that's not good. Right? So that's what we're after, is what kinds of things can we do? And that association right there is a great one. Any Office document calling command.exe or PowerShell or includes childs with PowerShell is bad. Right? So what did PowerShell logging catch? That big blob looked interesting. So let's talk a little bit about PowerShell bypass in the security log, 4688s. These are core Windows log, the security log. And so in this, what you're going to see is they're doing a hidden. So they're trying to hide the PowerShell window so you can't see it, right? They're doing their little bypassing of typical blow up the window. They're also doing minus not down here. So this is the minus no profile that I talked about earlier. That means the profile.ps1 will not load, or any of the 5 PowerShell profiles will not load, which means anything you set in there to capture what they're doing, turning on transcription on older V2 or setting the command line logging will not be enabled. So they have ways to get around this. So you have to watch out for these things. But looking at it solely by spelling won't work anymore. And we'll talk about that in a second. Here's a screenshot. Sorry, logarithm. But here's a screenshot of Humio. If you're not familiar with Humio, we just did a podcast on this. Listen to the podcast. They offer a free version. So all of you at home can sign up for Humio, go get the WinLog YAML file off of Malware Archaeology, and configure your home system, send it to the cloud-based 2 terabytes for 7 days free. So now you can start doing your own research and monitoring your own stuff and learning this all for free. So I give Humio great credit for doing that for us in the community. And I'm really proud that they sponsored a podcast after the effort we spend. But if you look in this, PowerShell non-interactive, no profile, execution bypass. The uppercase, lowercase thing always throws me that they do this because Windows isn't case sensitive, but email gateways and filters and tools sometimes are. So by doing that, they're looking at that case scenario, right, and trying to bypass controls. But for the most part in logging, this has no impact whatsoever. And then also here's an example of them doing a hidden. You can see some sleeping going on after that. To the right at the end, you can see the web client .download happening, but there's some ticks. We call that obfuscation in there. So here's the bypass happening and the hidden window. They do hide what they like to see. The 4688 will capture this behavior. And it's important to combine all the logs because that way, as certain things execute, the 4688 will give you the hierarchy, the linked process IDs to things, and the PowerShell logs will give you each independent item. Matter of fact, they're kind of noisy. You'll get, for one item, like 6 entries of 400s, 6 entries of 600s, 6 entries of 800s, 6 entries of 500s, because every time there's a function within that script executing, it registers another event log entry. But this is really cool because you can capture the process command line. This is the thing that's executing that's really funky in the standard security logs. So please turn this on. But I might catch some passwords. Good. So you should remediate the fact they're catching passwords. It's FUD. It's a reason why it's not in the Center for Internet Security Benchmarks or others. But you can remediate this problem. You can find these passwords being generated. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've run across passwords in logs like this rarely. I do find them in the username fields in the logs because people type their password accidentally, but this should not be a concern. Turn on process command line logging, please. And again, they'll bypass it with the V2 stuff with the -nop. And yay, Microsoft allows built-in bypasses, and there's tons of ways to spell the bypasses. Man, it's amazing. If you start typing PowerShell and hit the tab key, and that long command is unique, it will autofill it for you. So any combination of that name, invoke expression, can go all the way down to IEX. Daniel Bohannon does a great talk on this stuff. PowerShell logs are also valuable. So PSv2 v5 has a 400 and 600 event, as you'll also see in the older and newer versions. And they're formatted. They've got nice field names. But they also have information that will only show up in older versions or newer versions of PowerShell. The 800 event. So again, there's some specialized logging you have to turn on to get these things to collect. And they are somewhat duplicated. But you do need to turn them all on. For example, the 400s will give you warnings. The 800s will give you pipeline executions. So there's bits and parts in there that are quite valuable. So it's better to have too much data than not enough. And you can play with, in your environment, you can play with what you decide you want to do once you get everything properly configured. So let's look at PowerShell web calls. So here's an example of them phoning out PowerShell -nop, station, non-interactive, hidden, etc. New object, system.net.web client, download string, and some URL. That's in the clear. We can totally read that. Okay? We're going to see how they mess with that in a minute. And here you can see that it's encoded, which means you've got a blob here, and so that blob clearly can be that blob, but you can't translate it in a 4688. You need something else to help you. And so I tell people, look for these words. There is a link to a great research that I believe the Palo Alto guys did on all the PowerShell they got and all the iterations of the PowerShell commands and shortcuts that they used and the percentages in which they were used. And surprisingly, even though they can obfuscate, they generally don't do it a lot, but I'm starting to see more of it. And we'll talk about that obfuscation here in a sec. Another Humio screenshot. So again, sometimes obfuscated. Anybody care to read that? So now the spelling of looking for the words I just showed you will not work because they've broken them up with ticks. Yay for PowerShell that you can put in these special characters like ticks and carrots and they'll ignore it as it's executing. So PowerShell doesn't see those ticks and carrots. So when we do word searches in log management and we say, I want to look for web client, right? You can't. It no longer is the word web client. And there's so many iterations of this because I can put one tick in, two ticks in, I can put it every other letter. I got all kinds of iterations in there. And so we have to be real careful on how we build our queries. We can look for buzzwords. You should look for these bad words. But you should also look for the obfuscation items so that you can find these things in these blocks of scripts. And here's all the downloads of web client. But again, they'll hide it. They'll launch an encoded command, which is a Base64 blob. And you can tell Base64 because it's got an equal sign. But not all Base64 needs to end in 1 equal, 2 equals. If you do it right, it'll be actually no equals. So just know that Base64 has not always got an equal there, so you can't just trigger on that. You look at the size of the block, that's a big indicator. How many characters are in here? Trigger on that. You can take that Base64, go to a website and translate it, or built into PowerShell is a 4104 in version 5 and 6. The 4104 module logging will translate that for you and give you what's in that Base64 blob. So it does translation built in for you. It's awesome. Now you can see the fact that they're killing Excel after they download the file at the top, and then they're going to the URL and they're downloading their payload. Right? So that big Base64 blob just got translated in a 4104. Again, why you need PowerShell v5. You'll catch it as a 4104, not a 4688. The 4688 will have the Base64 blob. The 4104 will have the translated information. It's awesome. PowerShell can help you if you look. So it will decode it for you so now that you can actually read what it is they're downloading in English words. So now your buzzwords are back in for a 4104. Here's a big-ass Base64 blob. Anybody care to guess? This one has 2 equal signs. And again, once you decode it, what we look for here is the size of the block. So this is a Humio report that I have that just looks and measures how many characters in there. And I can regex saying, Base64 is A through Z, capital A through capital Z, and 0 through 9. So I look for blobs that are greater than X amount of characters, say 500 or 1,000. You will get definitely some white noise in here. There are normal, not Base64, but there'll be normal large blocks in your PowerShell from your utilities and stuff. And so you can trigger off the fact that there is these blobs in there to have your analyst say, there's a big blob and it's Base64 and I think I need to look at what that is. And then you can go look at the 4104s and see that potentially it's been unencoded, but they'll still obfuscate it within the encoded command, which I think is awesome. So they're using two techniques. So let's look at obfuscation. You can see obfuscation in the security logs 4688s. You can also see them in the 4104s after the payloads have been extracted, but also in the 400 events in the older Windows PowerShell logs. And what you're looking for is the special characters. Okay, there's lots of them. The main ones I see are the pluses and the ticks and the dollars and the percentages, but you'll see also the ampersands, a double ampersand in, for example, in the command string. I can say launch malware.exe, ampersand, ampersand, now launch word.exe. It's a hijack I can use to infect your machine every time you launch MS Word, for example. So the ampersands are also important, but any special characters that you feel you want to do. And they'll use a bunch of variables. You saw the word set in one of my examples earlier. And you can thank the research that Daniel Bohannon did for this, or I guess I should refer to him as Dollar Daniel with Obfuscated Bohannon. He did some extensive research here in regards to how he can launch PowerShell and break all the traditional ways of detecting it. But again, PowerShell gives you the ability, your log management solutions give you the ability to regex out what's in there. So one of the things I determined very quickly was, and this is available, I have tweeted this out as well, you can break out the ticks, so strip out all the A through Z's, all the 0 through 1s, and leave nothing but the special characters, including the parens and the squiggly parens. A lot of those are normal, and you can get rid of the ones that you know are normal. And then you start counting them. And suddenly this payload on the left, which has a whole bunch of pluses and unreadable, suddenly now I'm told that it has 138 ticks and 264 pluses. I'm sorry, but normal PowerShell run by a Bamboo, a Chocolatey, or whatever, your own admins, will never look like this. So suddenly now I'm directed at focusing at this being a bad payload. Not to mention I can just look at it. But again, your alert can say, I've got a PowerShell blob that has excessive amounts of obfuscation characters. And you count them. Here's an example, if you strip out all the letters, of actually a good blurb, because there's no oddball characters, just a few quotes, a lot of parents, a lot of backslashes, because there'd be paths involved here, right? And there's only 20 ticks and $2 and 3 semicolons. So that's the difference, the previous one being bad, right? Lots of this stuff, as opposed to something good, which has very few of it. Okay? And good PowerShell is readable. Admins and people that write PowerShell code for good don't obfuscate it. They make it readable. And again, you're looking for odd characters, right? Again, this is readable, and some more. Now, this happens to be some bad foo, but nevertheless unobfuscated, right? So it's not going to trigger that. But because it didn't trigger the obfuscation, it does trigger my web.client, my HTTP buzzword checks, right? So you do need both. Very good about that. Script block logging. So this is another good one. You can definitely tell what a script block logging is because at the top of the message of the PowerShell, it says script block 1 of 1, 2 of 2, 2 of 3, 2 of 4, etc. This happens to be my file auditing script that I ran. And you can look into this. There'll be more. Here's a huge script block. Again, the same thing with all the pluses. So now I'm looking at the size of the script block. Yes, this is obfuscated as well, but let's just look at the sheer size of it. You will get false positives here. But again, the false positives are A, readable, and B, you can exclude them. They are large. I would say start with somewhere around 1,000 characters. That's about 1,000 characters right here, about half of that. So not a very big blob will trigger on this. And you won't see this very often unless there's somebody running some big Bamboo or Chocolatey or Puppet Chef kind of stuff, right? But we'll talk about how to deal with that in a second. This is a normal script block. It's huge. A, I can read it. B, I've got to figure a way to exclude it from my results, okay? So when you look at the good versus the bad, one is very readable, unless they didn't obfuscate or try to hide what their code is. Two, if it's not readable and you immediately look at it and say, hey, this is bad, because your alert says give me something that's over 1,000, you can immediately tell the difference. So what we have to do is figure out how to get rid of the stuff in the upper left. And they will obfuscate it. Lots of ticks, lots of pluses. But again, look at the bad on the top, look at the good on the bottom. The numbers are way different. So I got 2 large blobs, one good, one bad. I've got obfuscation, one a lot, one not a lot. Suddenly now I can tell what's good and what's bad. So let's look at the module logging in the PowerShell operational log. Fortunately, a 41.4 will also trigger warnings. It is rare I tell anybody to look at the type of a log. Windows has informational logs, verbose logs, warning. It is rare I ever tell you to look at warning. This is a case in PowerShell where warnings are meaningful. This means there's a violation of the PowerShell rule going on. Now what that is, you're going to have to ask Microsoft. But the fact that it's a warning means I should take another look at it. So trigger on warnings, which I've never told anybody in any of my cheat sheets, except this one. So it's violating some rule in the course of doing this module load. And again, here's the warning. And again, it's not normal. You can look at all those pluses and characters. So it's violating a rule. PowerShell's saying, hey, this is kind of funky. You might want to take another look at it. So suddenly now, just on the warning alone, you can trigger, I'm possibly looking at this thing as potentially bad. If also it's triggering large block size, if also it's triggering obfuscation, if also it's triggering and or triggering the buzzwords, you know you have something to look at. That is not normal. And again, the warnings will stick out in your logs. It is literally something you just say type equals warning and use that from Splunk or Logarithm or Humio or whatever and say, hey, take another look at these warnings. There might be something wrong here. And if they're normal, you find they're normal, tell your scripter to go fix it or whitelist it out in your searches. And it right in there in the main logs, it'll tell you, warning. Now the cool thing in a 4100 log is it too will do some translation of what's executing. So again, the PowerShell v5 stuff with the 4104 translates. The 4100s, when they trigger the warnings, will translate data as well. So stuff that it's obfuscated, Base64 or encoded, suddenly now is readable. Okay? All translated. And you can see the warning. Boom. You can see that there is an IEX, which is invoke expression, and down here at the bottom, PowerShell Log 4100 event will tell you an invoking expression was executed. This is kind of a unique thing for the 4100s. So another valuable log. If it sees some call, because again, each part of this script is functions that PowerShell will log the various things. I got a script, I got a commandlet, I'm opening a prompt. All these things create events in the logs. And suddenly now there's some information I did not have before that I don't get from the other logs. And you can see the translation occurring. I can read this, but I can't read this, right? So you can see some of the, this is a Splunk dump of one of the bad foos. So you can make up the difference between whether or not it's translated or not. You'll see this. It'll become very apparent in your alerts. And they're all warnings. That's the other cool thing. Let's talk about 500s, probably the worst PowerShell event ID there is. There is some value to it. Unfortunately, the command line, again, if you do a -no profile and you set those variables in profile PS1, you will get a very cool command line of what executed, but the -nop will break that. But the host application field in all the PowerShell logs of the 400s, 500s, 600s, 800s, not the 4104s, that's just a big barf of data, will have this host application field. It is what you want to focus on. Host application is your friend. Unfortunately, it is written in two different ways. So for anybody parsing these logs, there is host application space equals space, and host application equals space. Since we wrote logmd and have this check in there, our program broke as we found PowerShell logs have different formatting. So it's like 3 teams wrote 3 different pieces of the logs. It makes it really difficult. It's the only logs in Windows that have this kind of problem. So if you are parsing this with Python or your own way, realize that there is a difference between the older V2 logs and how they were written, the V5 logs, and definitely the 4104s. And bam, it'll tell you here, PowerShell existed at kill, right? So you see the kill persistent Excel, I think is what's executing here. So it does read that and says, hey, I got something here. Because each one of the steps of the functions are executing and it will list it for you. And you can easily pull that out in a log report with Splunk. And hey, it's also Base64. This one had 2 equal signs. So you'll see that in the 500 events. The 200 events will also command health, so again, a warning. So the command health through an error of some sort warning you something got violated here. So in an ID 200, trigger on the warnings because again, something odd is going on and you can see it translated on the left and that plus and blurbs on the right. And so the warnings are definitely worthwhile. And you can see the IEX just like the previous log. Whitelisting PowerShell in the logs. So the idea here is this good or is this bad? This is going to be a bit of a challenge for you, and I expect that you'll have to kick off a project within your company to deal with this problem, however you want to do that. Meaning, if I have something that does have a word I can filter off, right? When I look at Splunk or Logarithm or Humio, and I get this blurb, I got to say, is this good or is this bad? If I determine this is good by something in there, and unfortunately a lot of PowerShell is like an inventory PowerShell script will be reading a bunch of information about your system. Well, so will Kevin Johnson, right? So will Renee's Renegades. They will be doing the same kind of thing. So I can't look at this and say, I'm going to take this good normal piece of PowerShell script and say, that's my filter. I need something more. In this case, it's chocolatey. So this is good, right? I can say, hey, chocolatey, I can say, don't show me any results that are in the chocolatey directory. That's something I can exclude from. So you look at the path. But more importantly, what I really want your developers to do and everybody to do is put comments in their PowerShell code with some secret key or script. Okay? We want you to basically put some comments in there, it's like any other scripting language, throughout your code, so when it ends up in the logs and it's chocolatey or Bob's admin script A checking the inventory and settings on your box, I can take that string, put it in Splunk or in a lookup table and say, not this, not this, not this, not this, and all your good foo goes away and all that's left is the bad foo. So consider this kind of a key or a secret key, but really some buzzwords that you're just commenting your code with. And as they execute, here's the other thing, all the script blocks, let's say there's 6 or 8 of them, you'll have to make sure they put comments in each area of that script block execution so you can easily exclude those. It's not hard, simple addition of some comments will do it, but just a word that you guys know that you can exclude it. And call it a secret key, call it a code, whatever you want. Or you could sign your scripts, but generally not a lot of people do that. So once you create these queries, you create alerts. So all that stuff I just executed, here is my inbox for email. When you see something like this and you see all these events, I've got a trigger for PowerShell Obfuscation, bad IP, DHCP wireless domain login. So I've got a bad IP in a lookup list, and this system went out and looked it up. I've got a PowerShell web call 4688, PowerShell Obfuscation, PowerShell web call 4104, PowerShell bypass, PowerShell web call 400, PowerShell bypass. So suddenly my inbox is full of something really weird. This is how you catch Renee's Renegades. This is how you catch Kevin Johnson and Dave Kennedy and all those exploit kits. You just set up alerts for all the stuff I just showed you and bam, you're going to catch them. So again, you want to make sure you do the PowerShell Log Goodness. You want to turn this stuff on. If you're on V2, make it go away. But I have a legacy box. I can't do anything about it. I can't upgrade to PowerShell 5, yada, yada, yada. Isolate it. Put that sucker in such a lockdown. Don't have 138, 139, 445 open to it. Don't allow the bad guys to get to this box as a flat scenario. You need to start isolating these boxes. These are the targets that if the bad guys and the pen testers find, they will go after knowing it's ineptness in logging and that you will not be detecting whatever they do. And remember, here's the screwed up part of PowerShell 5. PowerShell V2 is on every OS. Okay, there's this thing called a downgrade attack. If anybody's familiar with Ben 10's not PowerShell, unfortunately, you can call PowerShell's DLL, system.management.automation.dll, and a couple other DLLs, there's like 3 or 4 of them. You can call that with a bad binary. So you can actually write an executable that calls those DLLs and runs PowerShell without ever executing PowerShell.exe or PowerShell_IC. That sucks. Because now, how do I look at DLLs in Windows? I can't. DLLs do not log in Windows. I have to look at the executable, and then I hopefully look at some other data. But you do want to collect all this stuff. 4688. Process PowerShell executed, PowerShell bypass, PowerShell buzzwords. So yes, you're going to put the buzzwords in there, and they are useful. Most of the time, they will not obfuscate those words. You'll look for large blocks, all in those, Base64, etc., all with 4688s from the security log. PowerShell V2 logs, even though it's also through V5. 200s, 400s, and 500s. You do the same thing. Okay, you'll look for those events. And yes, you'll look for the no profile. If you see that, you know your PowerShell v2 is potentially not going to log anything. In the v2, you'll also look at the 200s and 400s for web calls. You count the obfuscation characters, the script size, the Base64 blocks, and yes, the warnings. You will definitely trigger on the warnings. In v5, you'll look at the 4100s and 4103s, which are execution pipeline, will be warnings. 4104 is the big blobs. You'll look at those as for verbose and warning. There will be no obfuscation here. They will strip it out. Or once it's stripped from Base64 or encoding, you will see some obfuscation. But mostly it's the big blob here is now readable. And also the 4100s and 4104s. Again, web call suspicious because that Base64, I couldn't see the web call. In the 4104, I can now read the web call. It might be obfuscated, so you got to account for that as well. And it will probably be a fairly large block of code. Because again, they don't have to put a binary in the box, they just have to create a bunch of PowerShell scripting. And again, look for Base64 and PowerShell warnings. In the v5s, the 800s are not real consistent across the PowerShells. But the pipeline execution, you do want the 800 events as well. The unique thing about the 800s that they give you is the user ID in which the script was executed under, whereas the other logs do not give that to you. But they are inconsistent among the PowerShell versions, so you do have to watch out for that. So, PowerShell DLL loads, and not PowerShell. Sysmon, how many people here are familiar with Sysmon? All right, Sysmon, event ID 7, module load, will show me binary.ben10.exe will load system.management whatever.dll. And that's how I'll catch that not type PowerShell scenario. So if one of those other things trigger, you could have Sysmon running or not running installed across your environment, which is how I tell people to do it from an IR perspective. And then when you need it, when you think something's going on, turn it on and let it run on that box for a while, because Sysmon, if it's not filtered correctly, will generate a cajillion log entries and fill up your license in Splunk or whatever very quickly. And that can be a problem for a lot of us who have limited licensing. But it will give you that piece of information that you cannot get anywhere else. That is one huge, powerful feature of Sysmon. So how do I hunt for PowerShell? Well, log management. I think I just threw at you two examples. You saw Splunk screens and Humio screens, and don't forget these guys can do it too. And I hope to have some of these screenshots with my Intel NUC set up here in the coming prezos. But log management is your best friend here. Without a doubt. You do need to forward those logs to a log management. Again, if you're not forwarding logs off of the core system you really want to monitor, the bad guys will clear them on you. So you need to get them off. I don't care if you're doing Windows event forwarding, but get them off that core system if it's something you really are concerned about. And again, if you don't have any fancy log management, you can use LogMD. In version 2.1, we are releasing a PowerShell foo catcher. And what you see here on the column is all those things I just talked about are now triggered as a, hey, look at me. There's suspicious artifact here. Encoding was detected. There's obfuscation. There were 138 ticks, 264 pluses, and it was a 2660 in block size. So we're taking all the things that we just talked about, and we're saying if you go run this across your environment and just collect our report underscore PowerShell CSV, throw that up to log management, we've gotten rid of a lot of the duplication for you, and it's very targeted to look at the bad foo. Now, this is very cool. And we have, what else we have on here? We have W client, so web client was detected, and this is why you need to look at all the log entries. Some of those may have been encoded, some of those may have been Base64'd, some of those may have been obfuscated. The combination of all this tells me clearly that this box has some bad foo going on. Because normally this report on your home system will be completely empty, unless you've got something running that's just probably a large block at best. But LogMD can now do this in version 2.1 going out by the end of the month. So in summary, LogMD will check your system and report to you. This gives you the place to start. Well, how do I know what I'm set to? Run this tool. It's free. Please download it. Upgrade to PowerShell 5. I beg of you. This is your #1 risk to your organization today. Pen testers will eat you alive if you can't log this. And if your pen tester isn't telling you to turn this on, get another pen tester. So here's a warning to all the people I just mentioned. And I know they're all going to tell you that. You have to turn on PowerShell v5. It is the only way you're going to catch what I told you here. If you stay with just 4688s and v2, you're going to miss a lot of detail. And again, enable the logging. It is not on by default. Microsoft's default logging of a Windows box will catch nothing. In one of my trainings I do, matter of fact, when I was hijacking Nathan's thing yesterday, besides Oklahoma, I did some training. I actually showed a Dridex infection on a default logged Windows box. There was 0 indications that box was infected. And then I showed the same infection with everything that was turned on with the cheat sheets, and you could see everything that Dridex did. There's a huge difference between doing logging right and what's default for Windows. Windows by default, really, really bad. So turn that on. There are cheat sheets for you to guide you on what to turn on. Everything I talked about is in the cheat sheets. Create reports and alerts once you play with it and get the stuff filtered. So your goal here is to whitelist out the noise, is to look at those blurbs and say, is this normal? No, that's just chocolatey, like my example in the Prezzo. Okay, I got a bunch of script blocks and there's nothing in there that's unique enough. Go talk to the guy. You can see what server it's running on. Go talk to the guy and say, what is this? Oh, that's so-and-so. Can you add some comments in there, like use the words, this ain't the foo you're looking for, so I can put in this ain't the foo you're looking for, and put that in my exclusion for my log management so I don't see those, and my alerts are suddenly more actionable. So that answers your question on how to deal with the whitelisting. So that's why I mean you might have to open a project and get a process going to open up tickets to get these guys to fix their scripts. I don't see it a lot, but when it happens, it's kind of in big blurbs. Again, maybe add Sysmon on a few systems, maybe consider a honeypot. A lot of people say Sysmon's great, I run it everywhere. I can own you all day to Sunday and turn Sysmon off and you won't even know I did that. And the pen testers do too. Okay, I can update the registry keys of the settings that Sysmon collects and it does not get logged anywhere. Unless you read my Windows logging file and registry auditing cheat sheet that tells you to monitor that key for any changes. But I can literally turn off stuff in the registry and Sysmon won't know, won't log anything, and suddenly I've made you blind. Okay? So be careful with Sysmon. But it's very good for these technical items like module loads. It also has some WMI stuff, etc. It's really, really valuable. Driver loads, another cool feature of Sysmon. And again, use the Windows Splunk and Humio. I hope to add Logarithm here in the future. Cheat sheets, because there's sample queries in there of how we've regexed. Humio uses the RE2 Google regex, and Splunk uses 3 different types of regex. Anybody's familiar with Splunk? Depending on where you're doing the regexing, it's really confusing. You go to regexer and you put it's working. You go to Splunk, put it in there, and you're like, why isn't it working? It will drive you crazy. So once you get to know the regexing part, or use LogMD as well. And again, send us your improvements and tweaks. I know somebody sent me a tweak of a Splunk query I posted somewhere, and it was a nice tweak. I kind of already had done something similar to it, but it was nice because I added that to the last update of the cheat sheet. But please start logging PowerShell, upgrade to V5. It is crucial for you. Resources. LogMD can be found at log-md.com, and the cheat sheets can be found at malwarearchaeology.com, as well as this Prezzo can be found at malwarearchaeology.com. Under resources, under cheat sheets, you'll find the cheat sheets. Under resources, under presentations, you'll find this presentation. Please download it and share it. It is free. With that, some resources. And Vincia is the one that did the, this line-by-line Vincia article is phenomenal. So if you want to know which buzzwords to use, which things to look for, that they have literally looked at thousands of samples of malware, that is an awesome place to start. And I can't tell you, that's probably the best list you can use. Okay? And then again, there's a bunch of post-exploitation kits, tools, if you want to do testing within your environment, right? Test yourself, hack yourself. There's a whole list of tools. You saw a short list on there. Daniel Bohannon stuff on obfuscation, and the Metasploit module that I talked about from my former colleague, Carlos Perez, is there as well. And with that, I will take questions and hit people with thumb drives. Yes?
So how long do you say it would take to get through the PowerShell cheat sheet to get all that set up?
I'm experienced, so an hour. I mean, you're setting this in GPO. There's 4 settings. It's not many, so it's pretty quick. Good question. Yes, set this in GPO. If you don't have GPO, I know all of it. How many people here definitely do not have everything in GPO? Microsoft's answer every time I find a flaw is set it in GPO. Not all of us put everything in GPO. There are reasons stuff is not in GPO. So yeah, but yes, set it in GPO. There's like 3 or 4 settings. The reg hacks are in the cheat sheet that you can set manually for those other systems or your home systems. Yes? Can you use group policy to tell PowerShell not to use ticks? No, it's built into the code. There's nothing you can do about this. It's awesome. Not only there's built-in bypasses, but all these obfuscation techniques are by design. Short names, long names, partial names, ticks, carrots. Yeah, no, can't do anything about it. Correct. So the comment is, people in my company aren't going to write a bunch of stuff with obfuscation. So is there a normal amount of ticks? It turns out those big chocolatey blobs will have enough quotes in them that it will trigger some number. I'm going to say start at 20. The settings.powershell.txt for logmd, we've set them all at 20. But you'll find some normal stuff will trigger at 20. And you'll even trigger stuff at 50 because there is normal uses of single ticks or quotes. There's a lot of squiggly brackets in PowerShell, as well as parens, as well as backslashes. You'll generally start throwing those out as you see whatever normal PowerShell is running, and you'll find that median. But if you want to test it, just again, refer back to my Prezzo. There were 200 and something pluses. You'll get nowhere near that in normal code, ever. Yes?
Actually, the guy over there.
Okay, over here. Yes? How do I define log retention policies? Don't follow the CIS benchmarks. They are grossly inadequate. I consider it to be negligence on their part at the numbers they're telling you to set their logs at. You should be in PowerShell set at a gig. They're telling you 16K is roughly what you should set it at. That's just negligent in my opinion. You should be at a minimum of 500 gig or gig in your security logs. If you're using Windows Firewall logs, for sure a gig. Some people say, I'm not using Windows Firewall logs, I got other tools that are doing that. Fine, you can go down to half a gig. But we have enough drive space today. This is not a problem. You can even go bigger than a gig locally if you want to. But PowerShell a gig, Sysmon a gig, depending on what you turn on, maybe 2 gig for Sysmon, because Sysmon will generate a lot of events, and a gig for security logs. And then you just rotate as it fills up and send that off box. A gig security log in a typical system gets you about a week. We only collect 1 to 7 days in logmd because of that number. So good question. Yes, any more questions? Yes, then I'll go over here.
Let's say you're looking at a host exploitation. You did not have any logs set up, and you see a case file, a call word, and PowerShell. Is there anywhere else you can go to find artifacts for what name execution?
So can I find it? Well, that just fluttered. Let's try that again. Oh, he's going to pass it back. Okay, and I'll throw another one. So are there any other places I can see the PowerShell artifacts? There is prefetch. We're getting into forensics now, right? Incident response triage, I consider things I can do within an hour. Forensics takes a lot longer than that, right? So you're kind of transitioning there. There is prefetch. It'll show you the binaries that are executing in there. But PowerShell script, not so much. Not so much. The scripting itself isn't really anywhere else. That's why the logs are so powerful. So yeah, if you get into that scenario, but I do tell people, this is a very common thing for IR, for us malware people, is even though a box is infected already, I can inspect it with logmd after it's infected. I will get it passing logmd so it collects everything, and there's a minus NE, no enforcement in case there's one log you definitely are not setting, in order to collect all the logs, so we fail on purpose. But once I've set everything, I clear the logs, I reboot the box, the persistence will kick in, and then I can analyze the box. But if PowerShell is what was used to go out and fetch the payload, I will have lost that, but I will catch the reloads through auto-run features of logmd or whatnot. It's a good question. But no, PowerShell is not really captured anywhere else other than forensically. There was one over here. I'll come back to you next.
Building on Nathan's talk yesterday, how did, in your resources, do you document how to test
We gotta keep
the
on
logging?
schedule, guys. Sorry. Thank you very much.
I got 2:45. Clock says 2:45. I got 2 minutes.
Did they start you late?
Yes. Said 0. Well, actually 30 seconds over, but it said 0. I have 2 minutes and 30 seconds. 2 minutes 40 now because you just took up 10 of it.
It's a real quick question. In your resources, do you go over how to test your logging?
The best way to test your logging, honestly, fire off those payloads, hire Dave's team to go pen test, or get a piece of malware, any malware, and just execute it, which is what you saw there. If you really want a piece of malware that's got PowerShell in it, send it to me. The problem is the downloader site will probably be dead now, right? So use fresh malware. It's actually a great way to test your stuff. Catch me afterwards. Thanks. I've still got 1:53. The clock doesn't lie. You said they fixed the time. Oh, it just got reset.
I am sorry.